Welcome to Bisa Kok, the channel where untold stories shine. What if the people you trusted most, the ones who raised you, abandoned you in a foreign land, with nothing but a cold goodbye note? This is the real story of Arsya Ramadhani. Left alone at 16, reborn as a woman who built a new life from ashes. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a story of survival. It's a blueprint for transformation. My name is Arsya Ramadhani. When I was 16, my parents said they wanted the whole family to take a relaxing vacation. Just the three of us. No little brother, no work calls, no distractions. I thought they were joking. But when they booked tickets to Indonesia, I believed them. This will be a fresh start, my mom said, her voice light as air, though her eyes didn't meet mine. I wasn't a perfect daughter. I failed science, got into shouting matches with classmates, and was called to the principal's office a few times. But I never imagined those would be reasons enough for them to take me out of the country and then disappear. At first, the trip looked just like a typical holiday postcard. Milan, glowing in golden sunlight, cobbled streets, icy gelato, melting on the tongue. We took pictures at the Trevi fountain. My mom hugged me gently from behind while my dad held the camera like we were truly a family, trying to heal old wounds. I wanted to believe it. I really did. That morning, we had breakfast at the cafe below the hotel. Dad ordered his usual black espresso. Mom picked a pastry and wore her brick red lipstick, the one she only used on special occasions. I sat across from them, eating and texting my best friend back home. It's okay. I think they're really trying. Then my mom looked at me and said, barely louder than a whisper, "Let's take a walk, pick up a few souvenirs, just 15 minutes. I nodded, not thinking twice. But 15 minutes turned into an hour, then 2, then 3. No texts, no calls. No one came back. I stumbled to the front desk asking for my parents' names. The receptionist looked confused, then said, "They checked out this morning." I froze. I ran upstairs and pounded on the hotel room door, but my key card no longer worked. A staff member helped open it. Inside, empty. No luggage, no clothes. Not a single sign I had ever belonged there. My phone was dead. I had no passport, no cash. Even my small backpack, my constant companion, had vanished without me noticing. I collapsed in the hallway, hands shaking, heart pounding. Every call to my parents went straight to voicemail. I kept texting, one frantic message after another. "Where are you? Is this a joke? I'm really freaking out." No reply. That night, I slept on a bench at the train station. The wind off the tracks was sharp and cold against my face. Every train whistle echoed like a slash through the silence. I had imagined many awful scenarios in my life, but never this, that my own parents would leave me behind in a foreign country. The next morning, I found a small folded note in my jacket pocket, written in my mom's familiar handwriting. "You're 16, old enough to survive." No apology, no explanation. Just one sentence, cold, final, and ringing in my head like the last snap of a thread I'd been clinging to. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where to go. Everything had disappeared, not in a nightmare, but in a painfully real moment. And I realized they didn't just leave me behind. They had erased me from their lives. I don't remember how long I walked after leaving the hotel, just that my feet burned, my eyes stung from exhaustion, and my stomach screamed for anything. I wandered the cobbled streets of Milan, tucking myself into narrow alleys to avoid strangers' stares. Night fell quickly, colder than I expected. No blanket, no one. Just a stone bench under the shuttered front of a store. I curled up, arms wrapped around my stomach, trying not to cry, but the tears came anyway. Every honk, every footstep made me flinch. I had never felt fear like that. Not fear of the dark, but fear of belonging nowhere at all. By the third day, hunger had dulled all taste to bitterness. I passed a tiny bakery on the corner of Via Mariulana. The smell of baking flour and melting butter teased every cell in my body. I stopped. A tray of fresh baguettes rested on the windowsill, probably left to cool. I didn't think. My hand reached out, quick, sneaky, just hoping to grab one before anyone saw. But another hand caught my wrist first. I froze. Trying to steal? The voice was low, firm. No anger, no scolding. I turned slowly. A woman, around her 60s, hair white as snow tied into a bun. Flour-speckled apron stood in front of me. She looked right into me, like she could read everything I didn't say. I said nothing. I couldn't. Hungry. I nodded, barely, as if moving too much might shatter me. You take bread, you wash trays, until I can see my reflection in them. I don't believe my ears. But she wasn't joking. She unlocked the door and gestured me inside. Her name was Busolastri. She had owned Forno di Busolastri for over 30 years. No husband, no kids, just an old oven, an aging cat named Espresso, and hands hardened by flour and fire. That night, I scrubbed nearly 20 baking trays caked in oil and burnt crumbs. The water was freezing. The vinegar cleaner clung to my skin, but I had never felt so grateful. Good enough, Busolastri said when I finished the last one. Upstairs, last room, down the hall. Old mattress, thin blanket. Not fancy, but better than that. I stood silent, wanting to ask why she did this, but she had already turned, back to her rising dough. The room was tiny, barely fit a bed, a desk, and a flickering yellow lamp. I curled under the faded blanket. For the first time in days, I slept. No train whistles, no hunger pangs, no fear of being forgotten. The next morning, Busolastri was already baking before sunrise. I smelled coffee. I stepped into the kitchen, and before I could speak, she placed a warm croissant in my hand. Eat. Then learn to shape dough. She never asked about my past, never asked why I was alone. Maybe she already knew, or maybe she understood that some questions are best left unanswered. Day by day, I learned to feel when the dough was just right, to twist my wrist to dust evenly, to gauge the oven heat by its hum. Busolastri didn't teach with instructions. She taught with glances, with do-overs, with quiet corrections like, better next time. I didn't know how long I'd stay. I didn't know what tomorrow held. But in that little kitchen, with the meowing cat and the warmth of the oven, I started to believe I might survive. Maybe even begin again. In the early months at Busolastri's bakery, I just existed. But once the hunger faded and my hands adapted to flour and fire, I started to think beyond survival. I couldn't remain the abandoned girl forever. I needed to do something. For myself, beyond myself, or at least discover who I was without anyone guiding me. One morning, while taking out the trash behind the bakery, I found an old backpack dumped near the bins. For some reason, I opened it. Inside was a cracked laptop, scratched all over, charger cable frayed. I nearly threw it away, until I thought, what if it still works? I smuggled it upstairs, used kitchen tape to hold the charger together. 3 days later, after many failed attempts, the screen flickered on. Dim, slow, but it lit up. My first self-made light. I used free Wi-Fi from the cafe next door, standing by the window for signal. I didn't know what I was looking for, until I found a free GED prep site. I signed up. By day, I baked, scrubbed, served. By night, I crouched by a tiny third-floor window, relearning math, reading American history in English that now felt foreign. I scribbled chemistry formulas on the back of pastry boxes, underlining them with borrowed ink pens from Busolastri, who still never asked why I studied. "As long as you're trying," she once said while slicing apples for a tart. That's enough. Nearly a year later, I took the GED. The test was at a small community center, 2 bus rides from the bakery. I passed. Not perfectly, but enough to prove I could do more than survive. I'm not sure why I grew obsessed with business. Maybe because I feared dependency. I started reading about finance, beginner articles, then forums, then complex analyses I needed a dictionary to understand. I devoured it all, like my brain was as starved as my body once was. One day, while wiping tables, I spotted a crumpled magazine someone left behind. The cover read, "Small Italian Startup Restructures for Global Growth." I didn't grasp it all, but I saw a tiny stock code at the bottom. That night, I borrowed a prepaid Visa card from a bakery supplier, someone I'd helped tutor his son in English, and used the €100.00 I'd saved to invest. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted to see if what I'd learned mattered. 2 weeks later, the stock doubled, then tripled. I watched the numbers flash on screen, heart pounding out of my chest, not because I was rich, but because, for the first time ever, I saw direct results from what I had learned, done, believed in, without being told. I cashed out and split the profits. Half bought a new espresso machine for the bakery. The old one had been leaking since last month. The other half I kept for a dream I hadn't yet named. That night, as I was copying down a list of free finance websites into my little notebook, Busolastri looked at me and tilted her head. "You've changed," she said. "You used to walk like the floor might collapse under you. Now you walk like you know where you're going." I didn't know how to respond, but inside, I whispered something to myself. I wasn't just the abandoned girl anymore. I didn't know when it happened, but the numbers on the screen no longer scared me. They became familiar, like the smell of fresh bread in the morning, like the clatter of the mixer each afternoon. After a few small investments, I saved enough to buy a brand new laptop. For the first time in my life, something just for me. I studied financial planning, supply chain optimization, even basic contract writing. All of it was free, from YouTube videos made by strangers to blog posts buried deep in corners of the internet, written by people who had once gone bankrupt and climbed their way back. I scribbled notes on the backs of pastry wrappers, cardboard box flaps, any scrap I could find. One evening, after helping Busolastri close the shop, I sat in front of the new espresso machine, the gift I'd secretly ordered with profit from my second investment. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "You're not the girl digging through trash behind the bakery anymore, Arsya Ramadhani." I stayed quiet, because she was right. When I turned 19, I registered my first business license under the name Arsya Consulting, just different enough that no one could trace it to me, but still felt like mine. I started by helping tourists understand the local market, guiding them on smarter currency exchanges, even helping some invest in small Italian startups. Then, from the people I had helped, I got referred to international students, people without legal documents, struggling with part-time jobs and skyrocketing rent. I taught them how to open digital bank accounts, how to find online income opportunities without ever leaving their tiny rented rooms. I showed them how to save every euro and how one day that same euro could fund the dream they thought they'd lost. I didn't charge a fixed fee. Some gave me thank you gifts, phone credit, a pizza dinner, or a handwritten card. I kept everyone, not for their value, but because they proved something I never used to believe. I could help someone. Busolastri didn't ask questions as usual, but she knew. She saw me pay the gas bill when she sighed at the mailbox. She said nothing when I installed a new security camera after someone broke the bakery window. And on a crisp fall morning, when I handed her the first smartphone she'd ever owned, with large fonts and a speed dial button labeled Arsya, She simply smiled, sipped her coffee, and nodded. "This old lady doesn't get these apps," she said, "but she knows how to say thank you." I still kept in touch with a few people from the US, people I once called used to know, but I never told them what I was doing. I didn't post anything online except the occasional photo of pastries to promote the shop. No one knew that Arsya Ramadhani, the girl once left behind in Milan, was now the quiet financial advisor to nearly 30 clients across Europe. I started sending money back to the US, not to my family, but to youth support centers in Yogyakarta, the state I once lived in. Each month, I picked a different program: a life skills summer camp, a free coding class, a mental health group for teens rejected by their families. I never put my name, I just signed, from someone who survived. One day, Busalastri found me slumped over the counter, surrounded by finance papers and glowing spreadsheets. "What are you building?" she asked. I looked up and smiled. For the first time, truly. A place for people no one believes in. To start over. She stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, "Then, don't forget to start with yourself." That night, I stood outside the closed bakery, watching the streetlight cast its glow on the stone pavement. I understood more clearly than ever. I was no longer a deleted footnote in someone else's story. I was writing my own. I was in the flower room, flipping through financial reports for a client, when Busalastri walked in, holding a crumpled newspaper someone had left on the morning coffee table. She didn't say anything. She simply placed it on the stainless steel counter and tapped a small box in the lower right corner of the real estate section. I leaned down. The dim light hit the eye. Looked closer at the address. Every number, every letter carried weight. I'd written that address on hundreds of school forms. I knew every crack in the road in front of that house, every creaky hinge that groaned in the wind. It was the house my parents bought after they abandoned me in Milan. The one I'd seen in photos they posted online with fake captions like "Fresh Start." Grateful for the peace life has given us. Now that house was listed for foreclosure. I sat in silence. Not because I was sad, but because somehow the world had just handed me back a key I thought was lost forever. A key to something that had never really closed. "What are you going to do?" Busalastri asked, eyes sharp as if she could see straight through me. I didn't answer right away. But that night, when the oven was off, I opened my laptop and began researching the auction. No one could know who I really was. If they recognized me, everything would fall apart. I registered for the auction under Arsya Consulting, using perfectly legal paperwork. The business account was ready. The funds were ready. Not much for the wealthy, but enough after 3 years of cautious investing. Everything was arranged quietly. I booked my flight to the US for the first time in 4 years. On the connecting flight from Milan to Singapore, I didn't sleep. I just stared out the window, where the thick layers of clouds looked like a foreign land. I used to think I'd never return. But I understood now. This wasn't returning. It was coming back, with a different role. I arrived in Jakarta on a freezing early winter morning. The auction was held outdoors, in a parking lot outside the county administration building. People stood in small groups, thick coats, numbered paddles, documents in hand. I wore a charcoal gray suit, my hair tied up, thin-rimmed glasses. No one looked at me twice. Busalastri stood beside me, calm as a steady tree. When I leaned in to whisper a number, she raised the paddle, on time, without hesitation. The price climbed faster than I expected. A middle-aged man, likely a broker, kept bidding. Every time Busalastri raised our number, he glanced our way, confused by the two unfamiliar women. I didn't blink. When the auctioneer's gavel came down and announced sold to number 162, I didn't smile. I didn't exhale. I just stared at the printed confirmation from the mobile printer. The address they once called home, now under a company I built from the wreckage they left behind. I didn't feel victory or revenge. What I felt was closure, like I'd finally shut a door I was once too afraid to walk through. We left the lot in silence. Only when we were in the car did Busalastri speak. You could have walked away, but you looked it in the eye. That's the difference between running and continuing. I turned to her. Her eyes held sorrow, but no fear. Maybe because she understood, just like I did. Sometimes, to be truly free, you have to return to the place that caged you and unlock the door yourself. I nodded, and I knew the hardest part was just beginning. The meeting was scheduled at a small real estate office on the outskirts of Jakarta, the kind used for signing deeds or renegotiating rental agreements. I chose it on purpose. Quiet, private, no nosy stares or gossiping voices. Everything had been arranged through my attorney, the only one who knew the full truth of my identity in this deal. I arrived 15 minutes early, neatly dressed, hair in a high bun, wire-frame glasses, no makeup, but a cold, composed expression. I sat alone in the conference room with a glass of water, listening to the ticking clock, not afraid, just quiet. Like I was watching my 16-year-old self again, curled up in a strange city, waiting for an answer that never came. The door opened. 2 people walked in. My mother wore a beige cardigan and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. Her chin was high, still clinging to a faded elegance like she was in control. My father trailed behind, clutching a worn leather folder, head low, steps hesitant. They sat across from me, showing nothing but a strange caution. They didn't recognize me, not a flicker of hesitation, not a familiar gesture. To them, I was just the rep from a company that had bought the house they were living in. I took off my glasses. The moment stretched like a slash through the air. My mother stiffened, lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. My father blinked twice, then looked down, avoiding my eyes like facing me meant facing a nightmare he'd long buried. "We've met before," I said, voice steady. "In Milan, when I was 16. My mother swallowed hard, fingers gripping her purse strap. We thought it would be easier for you," she said, her voice fraying. "We thought if we disappeared, you'd hate us less." I tilted my head, suppressing a bitter smile. "Instead of saying goodbye, you chose to disappear completely. Left me in a foreign country, no money, no passport, no message except old enough to survive." My father still wouldn't look up. I flicked the deed and slid it across the table. "I'm the one who bought the house you live in. The paperwork is fully legal. You have 30 days to leave. You can't do this," my mother whispered. This time, there were real tears, but I knew they weren't from regret. Only fear. "Can't?" I leaned back. "I used to wait for you to come back for me, just once, but that never happened. I don't need an apology anymore. I need closure." Busalastri walked in right then, holding a folder. She said nothing, just placed it on the table and gave me a sharp, calm nod. "We'll send the formal move-out schedule tomorrow," she said, voice colder than steel. "If you need help relocating, our company can refer someone." My mother shook her head, nearly sobbing. "We're family, Arsya Ramadhani." I stood. Family doesn't abandon each other in a foreign country and walk away like their child never existed. You made your choice, and now I've made mine. I walked out without looking back. I didn't need to hear another word. I'd lived long enough in silence to know this. Sometimes words don't need to be long, just timely. And I had just reclaimed the one thing they took from me, my right to choose. Less than a week after the meeting, I began to see my name appear on social media. Not in congratulations, but in venomous posts from the very person who gave birth to me. She's been poisoned by money and power, and came back to steal her parents' home. We just wanted her to grow up strong. We didn't expect she'd return as a stranger, cold and cruel. Under each post were hundreds of comments. Some were sympathetic, some furious, but most came from people I had never met, ready to judge a daughter who had kicked her parents out. I didn't respond. I didn't need to win online. I just needed to win in real life. Right after they moved out of the house, on time, without a word, I began renovating everything. The house that once symbolized betrayal was now becoming the foundation for something else. A safe place for girls who had been abandoned, just like me. I renamed the house Second Light because I believe sometimes the first light goes out too soon, but that doesn't mean it's the last. I repainted the worn yellow walls in a soft, calming blue, got rid of the cold, heavy furniture, and replaced it with cozy fabric sofas, warm bedside lamps, and secondhand bookshelves I collected from local libraries. The Live, Laugh, Love sign that used to hang in the living room was replaced with a simple framed quote. "You were not made to be invisible." The master bedroom became a shared space. I put in 2 bunk beds, each with its own little world, new mattresses, soft body pillows, and lockboxes for personal belongings. Boo Solastri, or as the girls later called her, Mama Boo Solastri, took charge of the kitchen. She taught them how to knead dough, how to keep an oven's temperature steady, how to make a perfect peach tart. But more than that, she taught them patience and trust, something it had taken me a long time to relearn. Our first session had 3 girls. Nadia, 17, kicked out after revealing she didn't follow her family's religion. Sekar, 18, who wandered near the train station after her stepfather refused to take her in when her mother passed. And Laris, 15, who didn't speak a word for the first week, just stared at the floor and nodded when spoken to. I didn't ask too many questions. I just said, "If you're here today, then you deserve to stay." We had dinner together every Saturday. I didn't allow phones at the table. Hands held spoons. Mouths could smile or stay silent, if that's what someone needed. No one was forced. But slowly, short answers turned into stories. Silence gave way to laughter. One day, I saw Laris quietly place a slice of Boo Solastri's toast on Nadia's windowsill with a folded note, "In case you're hungry tonight." I didn't intervene. I just stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, and smiled quietly. I continued my online consulting work. Part of the earnings went to keeping Second Light running. The rest went to funding job training programs and online courses for the girls. No one needed to know where the money came from. All they had to know was here. No one would ever be left behind again. Every time a new girl arrived, I took her upstairs to what used to be my bedroom. It had been split into an office and a reading nook. I let her sit down, then pointed to the wooden sign above the bookshelf. The words were carved by hand. "We don't promise to replace your old family, but we will not disappear." Then I handed her a pair of slippers, clean pajamas, and asked one question. "Tonight, would you rather sleep or talk?" The answer didn't matter. What mattered was she had a choice. I didn't need to explain myself to the world, because this house, the laughter from the kitchen, and Nadia's shy morning hugs were the only answers I ever needed. I didn't need validation from the past. I just needed to turn it into a foundation for something better. And now, I had. That afternoon, the sunset poured through the big glass window behind the kitchen, bathing everything in gold, from the edge of the table to Laris's hair as she folded napkins quietly at the corner. The scent of cinnamon cookies mixed with the giggles upstairs. Sekar and Nadia were fighting over tonight's playlist. It was a special evening, the 1-year anniversary of Second Light. I stood by the old doorframe that used to whistle with wind on freezing nights when I was the forgotten child. Now that very frame held a string of tiny lights, twinkling gently after dark. Nothing fancy, no flashy decorations, just things that truly belong to people, not appearances. Bisa Kok stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, showing a new girl how to slice apples safely. Her name was Putri, 14, quiet and jumpy when someone raised their voice. But under Bisa Kok's hands, she softened. I watched them, then looked away, afraid to break that small, fragile moment. Because I knew, for Putri, those apple slices were more than just fruit. They were the first taste of what it meant to stay. The door creaked open. Nadia peeked in, hair in a lopsided bun, voice excited. Arsya Ramadhani, we found your old Bluetooth speaker. It's ours now. I laughed softly, hands up in surrender. Just don't play rock at midnight, deal? Nadia winked and vanished upstairs, laughter trailing behind. The party started soon after. No big cake, no confetti, just warm food, music, and the kind of glances that said more than any family dinner I'd ever had before. Everyone brought something, a story, a keepsake, a whispered wish. We called it the relight ritual. I stayed behind after everyone had gone to their rooms or sat on the porch listening to Bisa Kok's old Italian tales. Alone in the warm kitchen light, I held a cup of herbal tea that had long gone cold. On the table was the framed note I'd hung on the first day of renovations. Not a family photo, not childhood memories, but a piece of paper with these words. We don't begin in perfect places, but we begin again, together. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't hear echoes from the past. No flashbacks of standing alone in a Roman square. No quiet ache of a forgotten child. I saw Elisa asleep on the armchair. Nadia tucked a blanket over her, spoon still in hand. Sekar turned on the hallway light, casting a soft glow through the window. Bisa Kok stood outside, broom in hand, humming an old Italian song as she swept leaves. Everything in this house once carried the stain of betrayal. Every creak, every shadow, every door I once hated. Now they were filled with laughter, warmth, and new life. I stepped into the backyard, looking up at the golden lights glowing under the porch. The night sky was clear, stars twinkling, wind rustling through the trees like a gentle blessing. Second Light wasn't just a shelter, it was a declaration. Proof to anyone who had ever been abandoned, labeled a burden, or made to feel invisible that we don't need to be accepted to exist. We just need a place to begin again, the right way. I looked back at the house, no longer a ghost from memory, and whispered for no one to hear but myself. This isn't just a house. This is where we begin again. And this time, no one gets left behind. Arsya Ramadhani's story is proof that the wounds of the past don't need to be hidden or erased. They can become the foundation for something meaningful. From a girl left behind in a foreign land, she chose not revenge, but compassion and action. Second Light is more than a house. It's the rebirth of hearts once broken. In a world full of judgment, Arsya Ramadhani chose quiet healing and gave others the chance to start over, just as she once wished for herself. What do you think of Arsya Ramadhani's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful stories about life and family. Arsya didn't get revenge. She built a refuge. From abandonment to leadership, from silence to second light, her journey reminds us that the most powerful closure doesn't come from shouting. It comes from rising, quietly and completely. If her story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Bisa Kok, where every story is a light waiting to be relit.